Welcome to the Smoke Pit. Joining us back again, Steve Kupryk. He is currently the Impact World Champion. Steve, how the hell are you?
I'm doing good, Daniel. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I think the last time we were on a call together is shortly after the withdrawal from Afghanistan. You and I were both on an episode of the Department of Veteran Affairs official podcast, Born the Battle, to kind of give our thoughts.
Yeah, that was a long time and feels like a lifetime ago, but you still don't forget of how that all went down.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy because it was like, here's one of the most profound things to happen in our lifetime, and to give their thoughts, these two asshole Marines.
Just a bunch of crayon eaters and burn pit lung fueled Marines.
Yeah, it's funny because I my go-to rebuttal, because banter. I think online people get too butthurt too quick if you give a quip or something, they think it's a challenge and they got to double down. But if you're in the smoke pit, somebody chats some shit and you fire right back, and that's just how it goes. But when everybody's like, "Yo, ha, 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 crayon eater," I'm like, that is a vicious stereotype. I am deeply offended.
Actually, speaking of the VA podcast, Tanner actually at my wedding got us crayons. Me and D, the edible ones though. Just a
Oh,
couple,
that's funny.
so it was pretty cool.
So were they like edible, or were they just like
No, they were
edible?
just like like no, no, not drug infused edible. Which they'd be a lot cooler. Different color.
$1 million idea.
The green weenie, just you feel pain and shame. Green weenie green. But no, it was they just like I don't know, like the chalk. Like remember you candy cigarettes when you were younger?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kind of like that. That's what it tasted like.
Right on, man. And the last time we talked before that, you were on the episode of the Smoke Pit. I believe it was Machine Guns and Powerbombs, which, if I must say, is an extremely clever title.
Yes.
Not to brag for myself.
Kudos for that one. Yeah, that was almost what, a year and a half, 2 years ago? Not even.
Yeah,
More than
yeah,
that.
about that. So, brother man, I gotta ask you. So based off of the last episode and just kind of everything that we talked about, building your career, how did it feel when you got to raise that Impact World Championship above your head and show it to the crowd?
It was cool. Friggin' after 10 years of being in the business, and I wrestle, for those listening, my name's Steve Cooper, but I wrestle under the name of Steve Macklin with Impact Wrestling. I've been there with them about 2 years now, and just the 2 years of opportunity they've given me to get to the point now as the Impact World Champion. It's just cool, man. Like, I don't know. Like, I was always told by buddies, like, on deployment, like, even in 2011, my buddy Chance and Beard, like, there's going to be an action figure of you one day. Because I would just sit there. I was like, I think I'm going to go be a pro wrestler. We'd be in
Yeah.
the middle of the desert just bullshit. And, like, you know how it goes when we're just, everybody's, oh, what are you going to do when you get out? What are you going to do when you get your DD 214? So, I'm going to do a lot of drugs. I'm going to go to college. Like, just all the fun things. But, like, I wanted to just dabble into pro wrestling and see if I had what it takes. And then obviously it's paying off. It's paying the bills for over a decade and
Yeah.
keeping a roof over my head. So it's a good business and it's very similar to the Marine Corps or just anything in general for that. With like locker room camaraderie and just the brotherhood and I don't know, just for everything to come together in that moment and just thinking over the past decade of never thinking I'd be there other than working at it and it was cool. It was awesome. And then my wife winning it the same night too,
Yeah.
cooler on her end. So it's like good thing just happened organically in the same night, and it was just fun. It's a good memory.
Yeah, no, that is wild. I'm glad you mentioned that. Uh, having a partner that's not only supportive but is in the same industry, and both you guys being able to take your titles home on the same night, like that had to be hot.
Yeah, there's the old there's the old ritual that you're supposed to have sex when you win the world titles. You have to have it
Yeah.
on while you're doing it, and of course, people are asking us the next day, like, "Did you do it? Did you guys do it? Did you?" First thing, not even a hello, anything. Like,
Nope.
"So did you guys do it?" And we're like, "It's not your business."
No, not your business. But on a completely separate note, these two pieces of metal were banging together all night, and my tetanitis is flaring up.
I heard a cowbell all night. But
Well, I also have to ask you this. From all your pictures, you look pretty oiled when you go out for your matches. How long does it take to get all that stuff off?
It's not really. It's just a little bit of cocoa butter on the chest and on the abs, just to get a
Yeah.
little layer on top of the tan. That's a 2 layer spray tan. And then I'm wearing a leather jacket, which is pretty insulated beforehand, so a lot of it's just sweat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the one good thing. A good tan for TV. That's all you need.
That's all you need. So, is there anything that that you wish more people knew about when it comes to your profession or your professional work ethic? Are there any misconceptions that you like to dispel, or just something that a question you're tired of being asked?
Well, you always get the fake word of like, oh, wrestling's fake. Does it really hurt? Does it really feel like this? It's like, no, we kill it. We're professional stuntmen and athletes that
Yeah,
never have an off season unless you're fully injured. If not, you're on the road 365 or when you can be home. Luckily, I'm home during the week. My schedule with Impact Wrestling is pretty easy, with like kind of 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off. But then
yeah,
I work independence as well. So on the free time, I'm working on the weekends at other independent shows around the country, and that's kind of fun. But yeah, it's always like, oh, it's this, but it's all fake. It's all predicted, right? It's like, yes, it's a story, just like a movie that you go see. We know what's going to happen, but we're prepared to train for whatever it is, and you find what works for you, and
yeah,
just how it all works out. So I think that's the one thing that it's just like, oh, it's fake. And then sometimes you'll be on a plane and people are like, oh, is it like amateur wrestling or is it like what kind of wrestling? Is like, no, it's professional wrestling, like WWE, Hulk Hogan, Rock. And then people are
yeah.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
So,
because the idea behind it is like I don't care who you are. It's kind of hard to fake getting power bombed, you know?
yeah, it's just that's where the training comes in. And again, another relation to being in the Marine Corps and just learning from boot camp and straight through of all the basics. You learn how to bump properly, how to tuck your chin, just how to brace yourself, how to do certain movements just with ease, but then also being light with it because you don't want to hurt each other either, too. So
Yeah,
it does all
I
hurt, but we're not hurting each other as much as we can. Sometimes you'll be punched for real and it sucks. And then after a couple more of them, you're like, what the fuck, man? learn, learn to fucking work. Stop doing that. This is what sells. So
I remember the back I think it was in the 90s. Undertaker and Vader were on a talk show in I think it was what was it Kuwait. It might
okay.
have been Kuwait. It might have been Dubai. I'll look that up real quick. And the reporter asked them, that same question. And Undertaker, was trying to handle it, and Vader just got pissed, and he started manhandling the host. It was Kuwait, yeah, and he's manhandling the host, and he ended up going to jail for a day or two because the authorities arrested him.
Hell yeah.
He snatched this dude who was a fraction of his size, like clean off his feet, and he's like, "Does this feel fake?" And like the dude was just terrified because Vader was massive, you know.
We can't do that now. Can't physically harm anyone, but we can
Yeah,
prove it by our performance. Because then there's people that are the ones that are really good at it. Suspend the disbelief when you're watching, where it looks like it's real, like and you're really getting hit. But like a lot of it's striking on contact, which I love contact. Being the Marine that I am, I'm just an idiot. So
yeah.
I like to feel it a little bit, so that it's like something to sell, but it's also the adrenaline off of it is the fun part.
And so, do you ever watch um, movies or TV shows like the Heels or The Wrestler or Glow? Especially with your wife. Do you guys ever watch those kind of things and like point out inaccuracies, just kind of like we do with military movies?
Kind of, but like Heels and Glow were really good. Heels is actually a really good show. I don't know if you've been watching it.
Yeah,
It's really good. Stephen Amell's done a really good job, and I know a few of the guys. I actually just wrestled with a kid in Texas. That's one of the stunt guys. He's a pro wrestler, but he does a lot of stunt work for a lot of the actors that are on it. Certain bumps and stuff that they can't do, so it's pretty cool. But they really try to put a lot of obviously the realism in pro wrestling that you see. Like the Wrestler was really good with Mickey Rourke. Like that
yeah,
was spot on to how it is coming down from being on top. Not so much anymore like that, but probably in the 80s and the 90s it was like that, where it's like you're on top of the world champion, pay-per-views, blah blah blah. Now you have to make it on the indies as your own name. So it's kind of cool to see how they went with that way and showing that route. And a lot of it was in Jersey too, which is cool.
yeah. You kind of look like Stephen Amell, the main character of Heels.
He probably looks like me, if anything. We'll say Stephen Mel looks like me.
Just two well built Caucasian men with beards and short hair in
Yeah, yes.
similar attire.
I still rock the high fit. I almost sent you a photo the other day too. I was when you texted me about doing the interview and what time and stuff with everything. I was like, oh, I was ready. I was just got a haircut too. I
Yeah.
was I look like a boot right now.
Well, don't suspend the disbelief for our listeners. You know, we do all of this organically. There's no preparation. We just happen to both be in a chat room at the same time and say, "Let's do a show."
Yeah, yeah, that's what I want to do.
So the reason why I reached out to Steve is because I um, oftentimes before I post something, I like to get some people's feedback because you never really know somebody's intention when they post something, whether it be tone, inflection, sarcasm, and so sometimes I'll send things to people to see what their first impressions are. Like, does this come off clearly? Do I sound like a dick? Do I uh, do I sound hypocritical or whatever the case is? Because I want to be able to put content out there that people can use to show their civilian friends and families and be like, this is how I feel. And so the tweet essentially says, I believe we need legislation that ensures our troops won't needlessly be sacrificed in another prolonged conflict with unclear or unrealistic goals like Vietnam and Afghanistan. As Slipknot once said, you want to win the war, know what you're fighting for. And I sent that over to Steve, and he's like, I'm a Marine, I can't read. No, I'm kidding.
uh, uh, uh. Talk like an ape. Actually, they speak a lot better than I do with the sign language. It's the crazy part. Yeah, no, you sent me over that, and it was just funny because it made me laugh seeing the Slipknot quote. But then also, like, you asked my opinion, I was just like, well, we all take the oath, so we're kind of screwed on that part of it. So
Yeah, I think that from a federal level, obviously the discussion has to be held because like when we first started talking about the Burn Pit Act, like it was just kind of something like, hey, we know we need this, and then it just took years to navigate the complexities and the specifics, and a lot of that was out of our hands, and we just kind of passed the ball to people who are more qualified to deal with the legalese. But the idea is that if you'd listen to any troop, anybody who spent any time in Iraq and Afghanistan, particularly Afghanistan, you would have heard criticisms of the local forces. You would say like, hey, this Tole commander is corrupt, or these troops are inadequately trained. They don't even want to be here. They don't care. They're going to go UA, and then we'd pass that information up, and we'd essentially just get a Roger, keep eyes on type answer. And it was just so frustrating that we called it for years. We're like, as soon as we leave, this is going to go down the drain. And instead of them listening and trying to implicate that and to take those implications into the strategy and have something, they just try to outspend it. How does the Afghan army lose to the Taliban when the Afghan army had an air force? You know what I mean? Like how does that make sense?
because the Taliban was in the Afghan the army, so uh, that's the that's the weird thing though. Is like 9 to 11 compared from whatchamacallit, my first deployment. It's just crazy. And then Marja from the A&A, the way they were, we didn't really get to work with the locals as much. My second deployment, but the first one in '09, like the A&A were just out there having fun, shooting RPGs, firing away. I just think they were blowing their load for those first few months, and after that, they're like, we're gonna go back to our old job. We'll let them know what everybody's doing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's why I don't know. Second
They're in
deployment
the
was
bachelor party phase for a
yeah,
few months.
the little honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
But like even like I said it to you, like the ISKI, I think we had this conversation before. Like the ISKI were a lot better than A&A, just because they were the local neighborhood watch of that area, and like they kept law and order, so they would take care of their crops, and that's the number one thing over there was the civilians' crops. At least in Margin was all that with their farming and their mud hut, and that's their world, and that's what they wanted to protect. So it's kind of crazy to think of how I don't know. That was just awful. We all knew. Well, I think you and I had the conversation when everything was going down too, with texting back and forth of just like, yeah, we all knew this. Like you said before, like everybody, like there's not. If once we leave, they're done.
Yeah, and so the fact that despite all the writing on the wall, we still had essentially a repeat of Vietnam, where the U.S. forces never lost a major battle in either conflict, and you kind of think about it. And one of the things that, like, maybe this is just me being an elder millennial, and now that I'm starting to get older, things get to me more. But by God, it pisses me off when I'm online and people are like, oh yeah, they got their ass kicked by farmers and sandals. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, we they got massacred at every turn. The last 10 years of the conflict was essentially them realizing they couldn't stand toe to toe and just emplacing IEDs at nighttime is still getting blown to hell with ISR, you know? It,
And then we'd have route clearance leading the way to take care of the Vicks, and they'd just be plowing it over with a bulldozer, just walking through their land, just driving through land and canals, going over the
yeah.
water. I remember down in Trucknawa in 11, like that was the fun, cool thing. I was actually talking about it last weekend with my buddy Barry, and it was funny how like we would just literally take the middle of the desert, set up a mini fob of sand dunes around us, truck in each corner, and those were our posts for a couple nights, and then we just kind of mobilized out of that, and it was just we just showed a force completely to them, like, oh fuck, we can't mess with them.
Yeah, and if you look at the and obviously, this is in all deference to anybody that we lost, but you look at the amount of casualties we had for 20 years versus a lot of these other conflicts, like even some of the conflicts that are currently going on. And it's like I don't know how anybody in their right mind can think that our military got manhandled. Like clearly our leaders were out strategized.
Yeah, just piss poor leadership is just how it all comes down to. Anyway, you know how that is. I had a great chain of command my first deployment. Second deployment was like, this, yeah, wasn't as good. So
And it's so crazy too, because like just one asshole in a wrong spot can really make the lives of, hundreds, if not thousands of Marines really shitty.
yeah, even like a bad section leader or even a platoon sergeant or a platoon commander, like it sucks. It was night and day to go from um, Lieutenant Morrow, my first deployment, to then I forget what rank he is now. I think he might be a colonel. He's probably a colonel now or a general. He was the man. Awesome, awesome, awesome platoon commander. But then we go right to a boot tenant with his freaking butter bar on the second deployment, and he's trying to give us kind of orders, and we're listening and doing the right thing, respecting the rank. And we're like, but sir, this is how we did this. This will work, and just against the grain the entire time.
Yeah, everybody has the good idea fairy on their shoulder where they think that they're going to, make it to the annals of Marine Corps history with with their decisions and stuff like that. And sometimes it's just like, dude, you just got to listen, man.
Listen to your senior lance corporals and your NCOs.
Yep, which is a great thing that you brought up. I remember, I think it was uh, General Amos, the old commandant. He got pissy about the idea that there are no senior lance corporals in the Marine Corps, and I was just like, okay, well, clearly you're so far removed that you don't understand why we say this, because clearly it's not a rank, but the idea that you have like a team leader lance corporal or a lance corporal squad leader that's supposed to be an E5. A senior lance corporal is somebody who's in a more important billet than some regular lance corporal. So like, oh, you don't want him to be called senior lance corporal? Promote him, give him money.
Yeah, give him that extra $20 a month so he can go paycheck at the PX out of dancers.
Yeah, which I mean, the difference between lance corporal and corporal, like that first 2 or 3 months is just going to cover the difference of adding the blood stripe, getting the EGA belt buckle, and all the differences between the getting new chevrons sewn on. So it's not even like you actually lose money when you get promoted.
Some clothing allowance you get written into our checks. I remember that. I remember even at a boot camp, probably I shouldn't have talked at all. But at boot camp, I was like, "Can you leave a little extra fabric in there? I like to lift weights." I was like, "Once I leave boot camp, I'm probably gonna put weight on." And they said, "No, no, no, you're getting like this." I'm like, "Okay." Left boot camp, got to the fleet, had to buy an entire set of alphas. And it was a couple grand to get
Yeah.
everything done properly. And I kept my locker in line, so it was just one of those things where I like to have that set up for locker inspections. God forbid.
Yeah.
So
But it's just kind of funny how even just with that the disconnect between the higher ups and the people out there that are just praying that each step it doesn't result in them getting their legs blown off, just vastly different. And so I think from a legislative perspective, there needs to be some sort of accountability where it's like, okay, if we enter into any sort of prolonged armed conflict every twice a year or every 2 years, whatever biannually means to you, there has to be some sort of congressional review where we talk about our specific goals, because at the end of the day, like they just told us, oh, hearts and minds, hearts and minds. Well, I just talked to Earl Plumley like an episode or two ago. He was a force recon Marine, then he went to the Army, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, and he's just like, no, as soon as we killed Bin Laden, like we should have started packing up. Like that's why
yeah,
we were there.
I said that right in the middle of our platoon where we're getting the word that friggin' Bin Laden was killed. And I was like, cool, we can go home. They said nope. And I remember
He
Gunny
wasn't
Barone.
even in this country.
I literally made the comment to Gunny Barone, and then he goes, "Nope, we're still staying. Hearts and minds. We got a lot of things to do here." I'm just like, okay, cool.
Yeah, and so like the idea that we have to, examine our objectives, examine our goals, and make sure that we are not needlessly, wasting lives. Because the scary thing is, the children who are being born today are the ones that our elected leaders are probably going to send to yet another prolonged conflict. That they're not going to have a clear goal, they're not going to have a clear strategy, and Americans are going to needlessly suffer.
There's no profit in peace, so you know how that works.
Yeah, and it's like, don't get me wrong, like I'm conflicted because like as a Marine, like obviously I want to slay bodies, right? Like.
Yeah, that's always that's we have that bloodlust, and that was even as soon
Mhm.
as we were in CAX and we were set to go back to Ramadi 2-8, and we got told, hey, we're all going to Afghanistan. And when we heard through the grapevine, like, hey guys, we're going to Afghanistan, that's why our workup can't get bigger, longer and longer. So it was just everybody sat there, and it was probably one of the coolest formations where definitely everybody had an erection, is yelling in the air, just a bunch of dumb Marines, and that's what we wanted to do. And I know, because I like I said to you, it's like we take that oath, and I understand where you're coming from on it, and you wish, but there's at the end of the day, once you sign that paperwork, say that oath, you're the government's property, and that's the shitty thing.
Yeah, and so I think with age comes a little bit of wisdom where I can acknowledge the hypocrisy in that. Like I volunteered for multiple deployments, and like so I like doing my job. I like being on the primary. I like kicking down doors. I like being out with the boys, and getting into firefights. And so I think like one of the things that I had to come to terms with was there was a big difference between the Gucci firefights that I was in, where it was just like maybe a handful, maybe a squad, like kind of even odds. You know what I mean? Or sometimes it'd only be one or two of them and a platoon of us. You know. And like, there's a big difference between being in a Gucci situation where you have the gear, the training advantage, the logistic advantage, close air support, you have medevacs, right? And you're just like, just whipping someone's ass. And a big difference between that and something like Iwo Jima, you know?
Yeah, and I can't imagine. My wife and I actually just booked a trip for France, and we're actually have Normandy on our list to travel to. So that's like one of those things.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious. Sorry, I'm changing subject, but it's
No,
just
no, please.
Iwo Jima and thinking of D-Day and all that. So it's just one of those things with a beach that I'm just wondering if we go there, because I've been to Pearl Harbor. We went a couple years ago, and it just had that eerie feel.
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering if that's how it's going to be on the beach, or like there's just some kind of vibe there. And but yeah, to suffer that way compared to what we had in the training. But then it's kind of the thing with pro wrestling. It's like, oh, back in my day, and that's always the thing that's always going to be said. So we wish we can maybe we can fix kind of what's going on in the world
Yeah.
and get to something like that where we do say, well, what's the mission? What are the goals? Why are we going in? What are we really there for? Whose pockets are we filling? Uh, so I don't know. Maybe it can change, and especially with the way the government is now, and a lot of the elected officials now, you see a lot of veterans kind of getting into that role, which is kind of cool to see. You hope they stick to taking care of us instead of Blue Falcon people, but
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there because when we were trying to get the burn pit bill passed, like, brother, man, I can't tell you how many times I knocked on the door of a representative, House or Senate that was a veteran, and or I tried to schedule a meeting with them or had meetings with them, and just like so many of them were unresponsive. We're like, hey, do you want to, read the bill and give us feedback? No. Do you want to join the caucus so that way you can have influence on it and give your input? No. Well, do you want to do anything? Like, oh no. Well, once the bill comes out, we'll look at it and give you our feedback. They never did, and this was depressing because like I did this for like a lot of the veterans who are in who are elected, and so few of them even gave us the time of day, and practically none of them supported us. And it's crazy because like I know people like to have their political alliances and stuff like that, and like everybody obviously entitled to their opinion, but it's like when you really look at who is doing things to help veterans, like it's not as clear cut as you think. And one of the biggest factions that were criticizing the burn pit bills were saying, oh, they're going to do this or they're spending that, and it's just like it wasn't true. And I was like a year later, and it's like, okay, show me where you said all this money was going to be spent frivolously. None of it has. And then the ones that are like, oh yeah, well it doesn't do this or it doesn't do this, so don't pass it. I'm like, all right, well it's been a year. Have any of you submitted a bill to amend it, or have any of you submitted a separate bill to cover those things that you were so mad? Those veterans that you were so critical of saying weren't going to get taken care of. Have you done anything to help them, or were you just being a mouthpiece because this guy's tie color was different than yours.
It's politics.
It really is, and it's just like it's sad because there are people out there that would rather see no one get any help than there be a victory for someone that they don't simp for.
Yeah, it's just it's shitty in the way of the world. Like, I was watching a video today randomly on Instagram. It was a guy like ODing in the middle of the street of Seattle, and like the cops,
Ooh.
he's watching, and you're just like, yeah, it's fentanyl. There's people just doing drugs and in the streets. So you see stuff like that, and it's they say they want to help, and it's just like a lot of like the homeless veterans. Like that's the number one thing for years that's been a problem that's not taken care of, helping out. And then the worst is like I don't know if you see it, but like there's a few times I'll be driving around and it's like homeless vet, like serve my country, blah, blah, anything will help. I'm like, are they really a veteran? That's like one
Yeah.
of the things where like a part of me is like, I want to do the right thing, try to help somebody. Sometimes I give some cash anyway, but not all the time. But it's just like, what do we have to do for that? And like, that's always been a problem. And it's sad that elected officials won't take care of it in certain aspects. And you have to look at guys like Gary Sinise, and John Stewart do more for veterans than anything.
Yeah, no, yeah, you make some very valid points. When I first got out of the Marine Corps, I had started a hauling company because it was essentially like, professional police calling. Because I was like, all right, I can start this business, and I only want to hire veterans and their family members, right? And so over the 3 or so years that I did that, I was able to hire, I think, around 40 veterans and their family members, mostly veterans. And the crazy thing was, is every time that I saw somebody with a homeless veteran sign, I'd flip a bitch and like go back and be like, hey, like I'll give you work, man. Like if I'm going to a job site now, or be here tomorrow morning and I'll pick you up, like, and I'll take you to this job site. I'm paying twice the minimum wage and you'll have cash in hand. And I can also help you like get in contact with resource officers, file for benefits. Like I'll take you to the library so you can use the internet, find like, somewhere to stay if you don't have somewhere to sleep tonight. And I tell you, not a single time did anyone ever take it up on me. And this happened maybe a dozen or two times over the course of several years where someone claims to be a homeless veteran. And I'm like, hey, look, I know it's not glorious. I know it's not sexy, but like I will give you work, pay you today or tomorrow. I will help you get your resources and benefits. And unfortunately, not a single person ever took me up on it. And it kind of bleeds into the idea that one of the biggest problems that we have with homelessness is mental health.
Yeah.
And if you are in a mental health crisis, you're not going to be lucid enough to want to get the help or to accept the help.
Yeah, that's another one thing that's been bad, and of course, is finding the mental health and the cures and stuff. Like I'm waiting on a VA appointment that I scheduled 2 weeks ago for July 13th. Was the next time my primary can see me. Like it's crazy to me. Like you have to wait that long for just basic things, and so I know mental health has gotten a lot better with the VA because that's usually the
Mhm.
first thing they say, or if this is a health emergency, like please contact or blah blah blah. But it's just one of those things where it's just getting worse, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can do all the push-ups you want and try to do a trend for
Yeah.
the for that, but I don't know. I think that comes from more research to be done. I don't know who's doing that. I know people are. My buddies Herrera and Pollock, they have the O3XX podcast, and they do a lot of
Mm.
stuff talking about mental health on that. But sorry, plugging them on here.
No, all good.
Bunch of 2 8 guys. But it's just funny that just
No,
like
if they're looking for a guest, let me know. I know someone.
they're with just yeah, mental health just sucks, man. And there's nothing you can do about it. And to add drugs onto it, you know how it
Yeah.
was all getting out of the Marine Corps with pain pills, friggin' Ambien. Everybody was being prescribed Ambien after my first deployment. It was just handing out like friggin' M&Ms. So
Yeah, dude,
like,
I had to come off of Ambien because it was just like I remember telling the wizard, I was like, my nightmares are evolving. They are getting worse and they are getting more personal and more complex, and I need to be off of this.
remember Malaria Mondays? To change subject. Oh,
Dude,
some,
oh my God.
some of those dreams. I wonder what those pills did to our bodies. They'll be
Dude, so
they'll be researching about like one of those things like the Camp Lejeune water. It's going to be about malaria pills.
dude, brother man, it's already happened, man. Let me Google this real quick. So while I'm Googling this, let me tell you a quick story. Um so I remember getting woken up for my rotation as SOG in Afghanistan, and the kid that woke me up was like, "Are you good, Sergeant?" I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm fucking tired, but like, yeah, I'm good." It's like, "No, like, are you good? Are you okay?" And I'm paraphrasing the conversation. But he was like, essentially, he was like, yeah, you were just complaining about how the damn moon people should pay taxes like the rest of us. And I was like, I do not remember that.
Malaria Monday. Some of the most lucid, crazy dreams in the world. I'm like, what did they do to us?
Yeah, and do you remember what the drug was called?
No, couldn't tell you. Like, hey, take this. It gives you great dreams. Cool.
Yeah, no, I remember they remember telling us that it'll help with our
Oh,
acne.
is it Methicillin?
It might be.
Yeah, Methicillin Mondays. I think it was called too. We were saying sometimes.
Yeah, I'll have to find the article because like there yeah, the okay, so I'm looking at the VA's official website right here. Most commonly reported side effects are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness, which had all of those if you're deployed. Seizures, restlessness, confusion, unusual behavior, liver problems for those who drink. Recent scientific literature has suggested that side effects including mood changes, bad or vivid dreams, agitation, suicidal thoughts, and suicidal behavior.
Hmm.
Psychiatric conditions, including active depression, recent history of depression, generalized anxiety disorder, or psychosis or schizophrenia, um, or other psychiatric disorders, those with a history of those should not take mefloquine. I'm not pronouncing that right.
I think it's Methicillin.
Yeah, and so like people with anxiety or depression, which was anybody who has ever been on a combat patrol should not take these drugs.
Oh, but we had fun with it though. That's the sad. It turned into like, oh, this is gonna be a good part of the week.
And so the interesting thing is that when we get back and we all kind of bomb burst back to our individual lives, it's kind of hard to keep track of everyone because like when we're deployed, it's just like, all right, everybody line up and take this pill so you don't get malaria. All right, everybody line up and let's do a weapons inspection. Everybody line up, let's do a fitness test to make sure that you're physically fit. And it's just not the case when you get out. And I obviously know that there is a huge availability of actions and policies that are open to criticism, and there are things that the government and programs and stuff like that have done poorly. But in the interest of fairness, in the interest of looking at an entire well-being solution, there are a lot of things that the veteran community can hold themselves a little bit more accountable when it comes to mental health. And some of those things, like you mentioned, like drugs. I had my gallbladder taken out about a year ago. Like I woke up one morning and I was just like, "Oh, this hurts." And Samantha's got her degree in emergency medicine, and she was like, "Yeah, no, you're colicky." And I was like, "I don't know what that means." She's like, "Go to the hospital," and they cut my gallbladder out because it was about to explode. And they gave me a whole stack of opioids. And we were about to go to Iceland, and I didn't take a single one of them because I was like, I don't want to be one of those dudes who gets like addicted to painkillers.
No, that's like, I don't know. My saving grace right now with in wrestling world, like I was drinking so much out of the Marine Corps, or during the Marine Corps, out of the Marine Corps, and then like in wrestling, like you guys obviously stay in shape, so like trying to like limit my drinking. I was like, all right, what else works? And it's just I love edibles now. My sleep is
Hmm.
10 milligrams, but like I know people just obviously I do the basic lowest of a drug. People are going out and just doing meth and I don't know, like going on acid trips and stuff. Like some of my buddies will just always constantly be high, and I'm just like I couldn't live like that. I don't know. And then like that brings up it stirs up a lot of depression and especially drinking too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like I missed friggin' field days on Thursdays just for the drinking parties that we would have. But
Hmm.
like we do one of those things. Like there'll be days where I'm just sitting around. I'll have a beer and then I'll have another beer, and then my wife say, "How many was that?" I was like, "I don't know, two or three." And she's like, "All right, we'll stop." I'm okay. Just because we have I off, like I just sit. It's like sitting in the barracks.
Yeah.
It's like the old lifestyle. It's like you're just sitting and bored. What does Marine do? They drink.
Yep.
Do something.
The least destructive thing you can do as a Marine in the barracks is just sit in one spot and drink and play video games.
Yes. Or
Uh,
yeah.
sleep. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right, man. Like there are plenty of things that and I know they don't want to hear it. I know the person who's listening to this right now, if you're in a position like this isn't a criticism. This is just bullshitting, right? So don't take offense. But we all do things that are probably not the best thing for our mental health. Whether it be your diet, your exercise, or probably even more importantly, trying to avoid the things that cause you to have negative feelings, whether it be toxic relationships, family drama, work stress, whatever the case is, like doing your best to try to mitigate those stresses. And if you can't remove yourself from these environments that are stressful, because like you need your job, you need to make money, you can't, turn your back on family, whatever the case is, setting boundaries and finding ways to limit things. And then also doing mindfulness and meditation or yoga or powerlifting, whatever your thing is that makes you feel better, whatever your thing is, making sure that you have dedicated time for that as a way to de-stress.
Yeah, that's I have the gym and wrestling for that with my job. So that's like I think
Yeah.
that's what attracted me to pro wrestling was just that adrenaline rush again. It's kind of going into a 5 to 15, 20-minute firefight in the ring, so to speak.
Yeah.
You get that adrenaline dump and then boom, it's on to the next one. So it's just one of those things where I found my escape quickly. I'm lucky that I did. But also I still have my problems. I never really figured out what my issues were. I've kind of figured out now later in life, almost was it 12 years later? Yeah, 12 years later already. Wow, we're old. Uh,
Yeah, you found a job where you get to choke slam your coworkers. By God, are so many people going to be envious of you for that?
I know it's great. I don't have to go to the tree line anymore to find my NCOs. But no, it's just finding that escape outlet. And like you said, whether it's working out, it's some type of meditation, but it's even just talking to like buddies that you deployed with. Like I know there's
Yep.
like buddies like we keep in touch. We were trying to catch up last weekend out in Cali when I was out there for a wedding, and we're just sitting there. I was like, "Hey, do you still talk to this guy? Have you heard from this guy?" And it's just funny. Like, yeah, he just disappeared, and it's like, how do you like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
well, if those are the people that are having problems, like know that there's people trying to reach out and like just talk with a fellow veteran or like listen to podcasts like this.
Yeah,
Chime
well, I appreciate that plug there, and no, dude, especially if you had a career that spanned any length of time, you have 40, 50 people in a platoon, then you have your buddies who are in the other platoons, your buddies you went to boot camp with, your buddies you went to SOI with, if you PCS or if you went to a training course like sergeant's course, squad leader course, McMap courses, whatever the case is, your corpsmen and people that you meet at the base gym or at the NCO club, whatever the case is. And so I did 12 years and I was stationed in two, three, four, five, like five different places, right? And the people you meet on deployment that are attached to you, and so it's just like I know thousands of Marines and corpsmen and sailors and airmen and Coast Guardians, right, from my career, and it's physically impossible for me to keep up with all of them, but I post things on my social media that are invitations, like, hey, if you want to learn more about this or if you want to talk about this, like recently I put something up where I've been experimenting a lot with the data behind exposure therapy, right? And so one of the things that I did was there's a documentary on the virtual reality headset that I have where a film crew went to Fallujah, and so I made sure I wasn't high for this because that would have been insane. But it's called Home from War, and I put on this virtual reality headset, and I'm in Fallujah again. I'm looking around and I'm seeing the little details, like the architectural things, like the rain of pipes that come out of the lawns, the stickers that go around the light switches, the brands of soap that you see in the kitchen, the the floor toilets and stuff like that. And it's like all these like little details that I forgot about are violently being assault. My senses are violently being assaulted by them again. And after I came out of it, I felt better for it because it was just like a little bit of closure. Because I don't know if we'll ever be tourists again. Like World War II veterans get to go back to Normandy, but I don't know if I'm ever going to get to go back to Fallujah in person.
Yeah, I don't think we're going back to Helmand Province anytime soon. Marja. I don't think we. What is this American randomly plopping in like,
Yeah.
hey, here with my kids.
No, dude, like, cause I remember I was being a little nostalgic, right? And I'm doing things that Marines do when you're nostalgic. Like, I'm going through my boot camp yearbook, right? And I'm finding names.
Boot thing to do.
Yeah, but the thing is that like I found my guide on LinkedIn and I sent him a message.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's
Yeah.
cool.
And so like, you remember a lot of these guys' last names, but being able to see their first name, and I sent a couple messages and I connected with a few people that I went to boot camp with in 2004. And we're twice as old now as we were when we went to boot camp. So a literal lifetime has passed, and that was pretty awesome. So I'd recommend anybody who is feeling nostalgic to do that. Like LinkedIn's a great tool. Um, Also, I went on Google Maps and I was looking at like places in Iraq and Afghanistan where we had like big firefights,
Mm.
you know?
Very
And the crazy thing is like one of the biggest firefights I was ever in Husayba in Al Anbar province, right where a spot where we took casualties, there's a vegan cafe there.
cool.
And next to that, where we took another casualty, there's an internet cafe that has 1 stars. And it's just like crazy to me because like how bad does your service have to be for you to get rated 1 out of 5 stars when that place has literally been a war zone for the last 20 years?
What a wow! It's just crazy. That's crazy. Maybe that's our that's gonna be our way of going over back to overseas with everything going is Google Maps.
Yeah, and the VR headset is has the app called Wander, and it's plugged into that. And granted, like a lot of those places haven't opened up yet. They haven't sent a Google smart car with all the cameras through Ramadi. But other places like Paris Island or Quantico, and like where you're like the bars or the strip clubs that used to go with your buddies back in the day, like you can go back there in virtual reality. And it's just kind of interesting because this form of exposure therapy, like obviously like consult your clinician or whoever your mental health provider is to see if it's good for you, and which that's really important. We need to come back to that, but like obviously consult what's good for you. But for me, being able to see these things again, to see pictures, to get some sort of closure, like that's very therapeutic.
Yeah, obviously that's got to be pretty crazy. I can't imagine like going down a road, friggin' an IED, friggin' Cowboys would be like crazy to just see the road of traveling because I was lead Vic both deployments, so it's just like crazy to think like to look down that road and just be like, today gonna.
Yeah, and so like on that side note, like it is really important to understand what works for you, because there's some people out there that they don't have good THC tolerance, so they go with CBD. There's some people out there that a glass of wine at the end of the day is very helpful for them, but there's other people that have alcohol dependency, so they can't use that as a coping mechanism. I remember I got back from my first deployment, which was probably my worst deployment as far as gunfighting, and the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1 had just come out. So like I'm there in flak and Kevlar, like playing team deathmatch at like 4 a.m. With just like tears coming down my face, and like to me, like that was therapeutic because like I felt like I was there in my comfort zone. Because like when you get pulled out of a situation like that, and it's like you turn your weapon and you turn your body armor, or your boys go home, you're alone, you're in your underwear, you're feeling vulnerable, you're still anxious, you still have all this combat stress, you don't have any purpose, like you don't have anyone to protect or any objective. um like for me it was very therapeutic to be able to play Call of Duty when I got back because I wasn't hurting anybody. I just probably just needed to get more sleep.
I think Battlefield 4, when I got out of the Marine Corps, it was like the first game that I like heard the hiss and the crack of like the round. And they were so I was just playing online and I'm sitting there and my dad was laughing at me the one time. He goes, "What are you doing?" I was like, I was like, nothing was helping me, no substance at all. And I'm just like, this is just trippy on its own. Like, I'm like, it's probably the most realistic shooter I played. And that was one of those ones. But yeah,
Yeah,
Modern Warfare 1 and 2, the new one now, it's just, I play that out still now. D's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just coping."
yeah,
Like, I don't know, something therapeutic to me too is just putting on like Band of Brothers, The Pacific, and having
mm,
it on in the background like helps. I don't know, like the noise and watching camaraderie of just them with like the boys, like just being in the barracks, hanging out and on patrol and joking when shit's hitting the fan. Like to me, seeing that and hearing it's also therapeutic in its own way too. I don't know if you do something similar. I don't
yeah.
know. Anytime a movie's on, like I'm just like, oh, this is like I don't know, it just brings you back.
Yeah, I have a hard time with more of the modern movies. Like I haven't seen Lone Survivor. I haven't seen just a lot of like the more modern GWAT type military movies. But no, like yeah, absolutely love Major Payne. Like that. That's one of those movies that when you're having a bad day, it's hard not to be smiling by the end of it.
Friggin' Tropic Thunder, even though it's a
Oh,
slow.
it's so good.
That's just one of those movies. Just
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And so everybody has their own things that make you feel better. but it's also important for everybody to kind of look for the things in your community, and like you said, the camaraderie, the things that bring you together, whether it be a veterans league, club, organization that does charitable things. And we were talking in the pre-interview about Wishes for Warriors, and they do a lot of great stuff. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about them.
Yeah, so Wishes for Warriors, charity for military veterans, and it's kind of like just like a make a wish where a bunch of veterans get together for excursions and trips. I've been trying to set up one, but I'm just busy with work on my schedule. But I want to get out there for one of them to hang out, and it's just cool because you're going river rafting, fishing, hunting, uh, whatever it is that you want to go do out of what they set up is just great. And my buddy Davila's one of the part owners there, or at least one of the spokesmen. I know that. And he was my first deployment wounded by an IED. And so it's like something cool that he set up because it's getting the boys together. And they did one to go see me at the pay per view at Hard to Kill a couple years, or yeah, well, yeah, 2 years back already, where they set it up and a bunch of 2-8 Marines that I served with came. And it was just cool for them to kind of all get together. They got an Airbnb, and the one thing that they got out of it from talking to my buddy Pollock and the guys that were there was just being able to communicate and have that camaraderie and just sitting around and drinking and hanging out and shooting the shit and telling stories, just kind of like a burn or a smoke pit. So it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know, just it's an awesome organization. So if you want, check them out at Wishes for Warriors. And they're just it's a cool thing to do, and I'm looking forward to hopefully somewhere down the road setting something up with them.
Yeah, and whether it's an organization like that or a Silky's hike, or even like I remember a few years back, I would just put out on social media like, hey, I'm doing a Memorial Day coffee get together. If there are any veterans who want to come together, we could talk about our boys. Like, we can say their names, make sure that the memories live on, and we can all be there for each other. And it's one of those things where if you're looking around in your community and you're not seeing something that you think you want to be a part of, then you can be the one to start it.
There's a bunch of VFWs and Elks Lodges and stuff around the area. I know there's a couple of VFWs here. I've been wanting to check one out. It looks like a good bar. But like, I
Yeah.
want to hear all good old war stories of all the knowledge.
Yeah, usually they have cheap beer, and when I joined the VFW, a bunch of the old timey members they were all buying me beers, and I got to the point where I was like, I will die if I drink all of these. So, and they're like, yeah, here, they already paid for them, so they gave me like a bunch of these like poker chips that said free beer on it, and I just left with like a pocket full of those, and I didn't pay for a beer like the entire time that I was a member there.
Awesome. Yeah, there's one right off of Goldenrod in Orlando because I know we were chatting about where you're from originally.
Goldenrod, that's a throwback.
Yeah, out there. So that's what I've been wanting to check out. But yeah, it's just there's so many different avenues through community, even church too.
Mhm.
I know our church that my wife and I go to, they're very outspoken of just even just in general, whether you're a veteran or not, of just having talking groups and meeting even after mass.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to touch base with the vets in your community because at the end of the day, being able to see somebody in person, go out and have a beer with them in person, obviously that that's a great asset to have in your life, particularly if you're having stress at work or relationship issues. Having that support network around you is extremely important because the most at-risk people in our community are those who have isolated themselves.
The one good thing is I'm lucky to have a good wife, and like anytime I get triggered, I know I'm not sure if things still kind of trigger you here and there, kind of put you in a mood, but she'll kind of notice like what happened or what's the matter, and then just explaining it. And I know it takes time to talk, but like in family and friends, don't be afraid to share your experiences with the people that are close to you too, if they're not a veteran, just because it opens up their eyes and it gets their opinion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that we can bridge that divide is exactly like you said. Telling them what's on our mind and why we feel the way that we feel. Because it's one thing just to be like, oh, I'm stressed, I'm pissed. But if people understand why, then maybe they can help out. Maybe they can help circumvent some of those things, or just maybe be more respectful when you're going through a hard time.
Yeah, and it's just yeah, it's just talk about it. That was the hardest part for me to get out of that habit of not talking about it at first. I don't know if for you. we're being the hard shells, and we're like, oh, we're Marines, we'll be okay.
The thing is that, like, when we were in the smoke pit, we were able to talk about anything and everything, whether it's the person back home that broke your heart, your issues with your dad, or whatever the case was. We'd bitch about work, we'd bitch about anything and everything that would piss us off. Cell phone company was giving you a raw deal, bitch about it in the smoke pit. And then, once we get out of the military, we kind of have this idea that, like, you have to kind of keep everything inside. And, that's part of why we even started this podcast, because some of the best therapy in the world was just going down to the smoke pit and just bullshitting with the Marines that were there.
Yeah. Luckily, I didn't smoke, but sometimes a lot of people just be hanging out because you're just shooting the shit and you're not even smoking a cigarette. We used to sit around the burn pits with our wag bags getting thrown into them while somebody just become getting done taking a shit, throwing a wag bag, and everybody's just hanging around the smoke pit. And that was it's just crazy to think. No wonder we have the burn pit problem.
Yeah, because I mean, it's hard for a civilian to understand what it's like to trot off into the woods with a spade, dig yourself a little hole, and while you're trying to pass some massive brick that is 8,000 calories worth of MRE food, all your buddies are throwing pine cones at you and insulting your family lineage.
Rocks and the brass that they were picking up, now they're throwing at you in the tree line, so it makes the friggin' police call later on go a lot longer.
They're trying to shake the tree so that way squirrels fall on you.
Oh, don't miss those. Don't. Yeah, I miss that.
Yeah, just a little bit.
It was always fun.
Yeah, it was a good time, man. But hey, I know you're a busy man, and I've kept you for long enough. So, is there anything else that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
No, like we talked about a lot on this, like it's okay to talk to people with mental health and with everything going on in the world. Like that's just find an outlet to talk to. Contact me through my Instagram or Twitter if you want to have a problem. It's how Daniel and I met. Granted, we met through Tanner, but we met through Instagram chatting, and here we are. We just constantly send DMs to each other and get our opinions and feelings on things, just in life.
Yeah, just the worst imaginable memes, the things that I don't want in any sort of congressional testimonies.
The ones I can't share with my wife, I usually send to you.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But then even stuff like you see politically, like we share, and like just get your opinions. Like, and even when we linked up for the pull out of Afghanistan and talking that way, like that's something an outlet to talk about. And I was lucky enough to have you to chat with, so and listen to other veterans. So it's just one of those things of just talking about it. Whatever your problem is, that you're not alone in the problem. Everybody's going through it. What was the old slogan of it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
But we laughed about it then, but it really is the truth. Like it's not everybody's okay. So everybody's got their own problems. You don't know what's going on in their life. So it's okay to just chat and open up and find an outlet.
Exactly. Could not have said it better myself, and I don't think there's anything to add to that. So, Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me. Semper Kill.
Fair winds following seas. We'll see you next time here in the smoke pit.